Cool. I'm going to mute myself and hand you guys over to Aster.
Yes. And I want to acknowledge that I'm on Wurundjeri lands at the moment, which is where I live, I should say, and deeply acknowledge First Nations people as the first educators and storytellers on these lands, which is part of a very, very long and amazing tradition, which we get to jump in for a very, very small part of ourselves. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen. Are you seeing the right thing? Yes. Yes, my name is Aster. I'm a pronoun they, them. I'm an educational designer based at Monash University. So we're saying what we'll be talking about today. I have on my next slide, I have a rough overview. So there's a technique which is called Goodman analysis. And this is basically a way that you can take a rubric and the results that you get within that rubric and use it to essentially give you suggestions, recommendations, things to focus on when it comes to improving a module or learning experience. So I've got some things in there that I'll intend to go through. So essentially how you can how and why you might use a rubric like that, and how that turns into a sort of analytical technique. And I may make reference to I'll probably make reference to Vygotsky at one point because I feel like it's impossible not to, but and I will do a run through of how to do the technique as well, which will be the thing that I'm least clear about how long it will actually take. I know how long it'll take to speak the rest of things, but hopefully it is within a reasonable time. But yeah, feel free to pop things in the chat if you have questions as you go, or you can interrupt me if it's not 50 million times, then that's fine too. So first of all, starting with rubrics. So basically, why would you want to use the data that you got from a rubric this way? So generally, when we prepare a rubric, we've already got in our mind the goals that we wanted the participants to achieve. Or the goals that we wanted to see within the work that we're reviewing, whatever it is that you're applying the rubric to. So it'll be aligned to those intentions. It will be generally broken down into some criteria or areas of interest. And in most cases, it depends on the kind of rubric, but generally you'll have a few levels. So there are kind of better ways to do things and not so good ways to do things. So that is interesting to us because when you rate work using something like that, you can establish where it sits. And if you have a lot of data, you can start to see some trends coming out of that. And people tend to do, at the very least, things like basic statistics. Oh, I'm giving spoilers. Stop giving spoilers. And then the only other reason that it comes in is usually, and this may demonstrate my own focus within a university space, but if you're using a rubric, this is potentially the only data gathering thing that you have which captures all of the participants, or about as close as you can get. Because if it's an assessment item, the participants will do it because they want to complete the module. So it gives you the most data about the most participants. So that's why they can be really helpful as data gathering vehicles. So, okay. I have to be careful not to give spoilers. So I'm curious to kind of get a sense of if you do have assessment results, perhaps using rubrics. I'm very curious to kind of hear how people make use of that at the moment. People want to chat or verbalize. Just curious to hear how people currently use some of this sort of information.
I think for me, we don't, because I'm not at a university, I'm at a hospital, and so we just have pass or fail. And so if people get 80% or more or 100% or more, then they pass. And then we just get the statistics about whether or not someone's completed or not completed. But we don't really go into much detail. So
yeah, so it's kind of like at a holistic level.
yeah.
Yeah.
What about other people?
Yeah, we're the same. We only do like a pass or fail. We're pretty generous. We usually give our staff unlimited chances because we really don't want to set them up to fail. And we've built into some of our quizzes feedback, or we'll give them the option of, going back to that part of the presentation where the information is, so that they can reread them, and then it takes them back to the quiz. So yeah, but we definitely don't use rubrics, no.
Another way of interpreting this could be, and it technically fits into the same approach, but it kind of breaks your brain slightly. If you have the data of people attempting things and not getting it, you could essentially almost treat that as like another participant. So you could kind of have like a sequence of, I don't know, there were 5 attempts through this module. And, in the first 4, they didn't quite get to it. What was the point that they got stuck at or something? And you could kind of pull some of the same information out, because it's still ultimately, I have to be very careful not to give the spoilers because I'll talk about this in a sec. But you technically don't have to consider like sort of just the final of one participant. It could be, a sequence of their attempts, which may form the same kind of data, even if it's just they got it or they didn't get it. That can still be quite interesting too.
So I don't know if because we basically use Storyline for most of our content development. I don't know if it has the capability to do that. It'd be good if anyone knows whether you can, because it just ends up being a SCORM, obviously, that just goes into our learning management system, and the learning management system just ticks it off as yes, you passed, or no, you didn't. And so, yeah, I don't know how we would be able to get that level of data, which would be great, because if we can see where people are getting stuck, and if there's a particular, area of expertise that they're not getting, or because we're not explaining it well, it would be great to be able to get that level. But
yeah, let's come back to that one. I think that's an interesting point that can come in once we kind of see what you can do with the technique.
Yeah,
can I jump in there? At Eastern Health, I've used rubrics a little bit, but I've worked university and health. But mostly rubrics in health were for a university subject we were running. So we don't have much data on that because we had a quite small cohort. But we actually moved all of our assessments out of SCORM, and we use the system-based tool so that we can jump in and look at all of the data. So we're just working out the best way to then present that back to the SMEs to adjust what they're creating for their assessments, and really utilising feedback as well, so that if someone has got it wrong with those unlimited attempts, that they can actually go and pinpoint where that was, or we work out that it was our questioning that was atrocious and that's why it was wrong. One or the other.
Yeah, that is actually one of the things that can sometimes be discovered by the technique that I'm going to show you folks. So very, very interesting that that's one of the things that sometimes comes out of it. Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, so what I will let me tell you about what this technique is. So it's called Gutman analysis, and you can Google it if you're interested as well. So it's basically using all of that participant data that you've collected, whatever it is that you can collect, I suppose, and sort of treating the sort of atomic level of it, of, how did they do in this part, how did they do in this part, this part, this part. And you can use that to tell sort of empirically what did participants find the easiest to the most difficult. So you can kind of rank them in that way. You can see what might have been misunderstood. It's not sort of this is obviously exactly what has happened, but it's kind of, look at this thing. Something is a bit odd here. And it can also give you a sense of what are they ready for. So, there's kind of like a bit of an edge between what students or participants have clearly captured, what they clearly read, they've done this. We don't need to test them on that anymore. This is the thing which is next for them. This is where we want to stretch them. So it can give you a sense of those places as well, which is interesting. So In order to actually be able to do this, you generally need at least 20. I've written individual attempts, so that could be 20 attempts of the same person, as long as it's using the same rubric or item. It could be 20 different people, some combination of the two. If it's a combination, that's probably going to be hardest to disentangle, but at least 20 pieces of attempt data. And you generally want to have a rubric that basically you can kind of see atomic kind of achievements. So, what we're comparing them against, we can basically say, yes, we know for sure that they have either done this or not done this. It's because you'll have complexity if it's something like the participant very precisely and in great depth explains blah, blah, blah. And then there's kind of, what do we mean by saying in great depth? So we want to be able to remove those levels of ambiguity as much as possible, which is a hard task. I am not saying that is an easy thing to do, but the better that happens, the easier it is to use this data. And then the last thing that we need to, in this case, know is how we can kind of interpret performance in a probabilistic sense. And this is where the tool, the approach comes in. So basically, I would say mention Vygotsky. So you may or may not be familiar with Vygotsky's more knowledgeable other. I'm not sure if that's a term that's familiar to anyone. If it's not, I'll explain it. But if it is, I'm happy for someone to tell us about that. Shaking heads. Okay, that's fine. So basically, so this is a principle. So Vygotsky talks about the sort of zone of proximal development. So this is kind of the area that someone occupies where they can do a thing if they're helped by someone. And helped by someone could be the teacher wrote a template and left the template for them to use. So it could be, they're interacting with some scaffold. It could be they're sitting next to another person and they're working together. But someone who has a little bit more knowledge of the thing. So that proximal development, I can get there with some help. That's basically what that means. And so there are kind of two other sort of implied zones around that. So if you've got the, I can do it if I have help, there's also the, I already know how to do this. I don't need any help. I don't need the training wheels on my bicycle anymore because I've been riding my bicycle for 20 years and I don't fall off anymore. So the training wheels is what you use when you're in that, I can do it with help. But then there's the, oh my God, this is so beyond me. This is just not going to happen, which I'm just calling the not yet. I don't think it has like an actual title, but I'm just calling it the not yet because it doesn't matter if you have someone working with you or you have the templates or the scaffolds. It's just so beyond what you're ready for that it's just not going to happen. The probabilistic side of this is it's probably not going to be 100% of the time that someone who can, I can do it reliably. It doesn't mean 100% of the time. So I've been riding my bike for 20 years. I might still sometimes fall off. Or, in the not yet, hey, I wasn't expecting them to be able to, but by, chance, they happen to cycle the pedals in a good enough way to get the distance. Or, it's a little kid that waddles over before you're expecting them to be able to walk. And maybe they still haven't figured out how to work, but wow, great job. So probably almost never in the not yet camp. So we kind of use these like very hand wavy sorts of things. We might say, okay, 95% of the time, if we reckon you've got it pretty reliably, you probably get it 95% of the time. If you're really not there yet, maybe 5% of the time. But in that, you can do it with help. There'll be mixed success. So we pitch it around 50%. This is a little hand wavy. I appreciate this. There's not a magic to 95 and 5. I could probably come up with a magic if you want. But that's basically the basis of this. And this is kind of how we use to establish roughly where a group of students are. Because you can't use this necessarily to say it about exactly one attempt or person, but in looking at an aggregate is where it comes in. Yeah, so so this is kind of like a mock-up of some rubric that I've set up before. This is not a real rubric. I've just kind of like used some rubric sounding language. So in this case, I've kind of got, I know this is probably a little unusual, but I've got vertical criteria. So the first column is these people have analyzed the results of something or other. The second column is they have done a mock-up of something or other. I don't know what it is, doesn't really matter. And then the levels that are higher up are better. The levels that are lower down are not as good. It's basically, it doesn't really matter exactly what's in it, but that's kind of the structure of this. So you can take each of those levels and criteria and just pull them out into their own column in a table. And if at that point, you just need to track whether someone has achieved that level or not. So it's just a yes, no. So if I marked someone as being at level 2 in this first one and level 0 in the second one, then I would basically be giving them a tick here and a tick for these first 3. So it's just a yes or a no. Yeah, so that might look like this. So here are all of the people or attempts. It's I guess it's a 1 or a 0 instead of a yes or a no, but same idea. So if they didn't get it, it's a 0. If they did, it's a 1. That is all that you need in terms of the data. So I do have an example that I can work through and show you what this gives us. So this is in Google Sheets. So there are some things which are slightly annoying to do. So this is from I think I did an audit at some point. I was reviewing the way that assessments were set up. So these are all of the different levels in criteria that I had. Again, the ones are they achieved it, the zeros are they didn't, and these are just, each row is an individual attempt. At the end, I just added them all up. So all of the ones, and that's kind of the score. And then at the very, very bottom, I've also added up the number of people who achieved this. So it's just some summing up. So summing up everything in this column, summing up everything in this row. And the rest of what you get comes from sorting. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to organize it based on how much they got, how many of them they got correct. Sort by the sum. Ooh, I wonder what, it's not treating it as a number. I reckon that will work. Okay, it did treat it as a number. So now what you've got is the people who did the best, they're at the top. The people who did the worst, they're at the bottom. So that's one part of it. And then the other part is a little bit wonky to do in Google Sheets, because technically I also need to sort it from left to right. And again, it would be based on the ones that most people got would be on the left, and the ones that least people got would be on the right. I have to do a slightly weird thing because it's Google Sheets, so I kind of just have to rotate it. So you can actually do this directly in Excel. It lets you sort things left to right. Do that. And makes it so long. Yeah, okay, so this is now the number of people who have gotten it. So I'll do the same thing again. sort it like that. And I'll just take it back, rotated to the way that it's supposed to be facing. Okay. So what you've got after this sorting from left to right and top down, it's too small. So you kind of got this like colorful pattern here, where in the top left, there's a lot of ones, the bottom right, there's a lot of zeros. So essentially the best performing people are at the top, the worst performing at the bottom. The easiest things are at the left and the hardest things are at the right. So that tells me some things. So these things were easy to do according to how they actually performed. Some of these things were hard. Some of these things are about the writing of rubrics. Almost all of the writing of rubrics things are in the right. I did say that it was hard to do that, so that possibly makes sense. So that already gives you some information. It tells you actually how easy or hard were things for participants to do. There are other things that you can do as well here. So now again, it's like 95% of the time, if you get it, 95% of the time you should be able to get it if it's something you can do. So you can kind of try to find groups where it's, well, actually you'd be looking for groups where it's like 50-50 chance. And that kind of tells you these people could get it if they had help. And anyone who's above that, they've probably figured it out. Anyone who's below it, they're not ready for it. So that's why the 50% comes in handy. So I could basically select a random block of stuff and I could literally just see what's the average. So Excel will do the same thing. So this says that's pretty close to 50%. So I could possibly arguably say that that is a group of, they could do this if they had help, or if I gave them some scaffolds. And I could probably find some other ones here as well. This is the part where it's, again, a bit hand wavy, because I could find that in a lot of spots. I could expand it very slightly. That's not the direction I was trying to expand it. So I don't know, if I grab from the top right corner, I could move up and down. I was trying to get to, so yeah, so there it is, but basically exactly 50 or very close to. I could, include or exclude one more. It's kind of a little bit hand wavy here. So you could do this a few times and it might be different spots every time. That's okay. Although I will say, given that like these top people did really well, it's probably a bit odd that they did badly at these ones. So I may actually have to exclude it. The thing that's odd here is kind of, you would expect that the people at the top would get most things, the people at the bottom would not, but you can kind of see that it's kind of spread all the way down, which says this may not be related to their actual abilities. Something else has gone on. In this case, I don't think they actually knew that that was something that was reasonable to do. So even the people who were doing a good job, no one necessarily told them, go and prepare these things. So they didn't. So those sort of unusual patterns, and perhaps possibly this one as well, because you can kind of see, if you were looking for the pattern that's kind of like this, like sort of vague sort of pattern here, which is kind of, maybe that's like the edge of where it starts to turn into zeros. So this one's possibly also a little unusual. Yeah, so I may need to just kind of pretend that those ones don't exist, that maybe they weren't quite right to ask about, or I didn't pose things correctly. Honestly, possibly these two as well. But it's possible that these two are just very, very hard. That I'm seeing a bunch down the bottom kind of give me also a sort of a bit of a vibe. Oh, question, Judy.
Yeah, sorry, Esther. So I'm just curious, how do you then pass all that sort of, like, that's a lot of information. How do you pass that on succinctly to your subject matter expert who, you know, obviously then need to be sort of changing the content or doing whatever they need to do? Like, how do you get that info?
So basically, these ones that I'm kind of like, there seems to be something a little bit odd there. I would just highlight it, and I'd basically say, okay, and honestly, I probably should do the highlighting a little bit later. But anyway, let's say that we decided these ones are strange. I would go back to the subject matter expert and say, so I was having a look at this giving of time management advice, and the pattern seemed a little odd. I was expecting that some of the high performers would be able to get this, but it seems a little bit random. Can we look at how the instruction was given there?
Yeah.
Or can we look at how the task was set up?
Yeah.
Because it's possible that they didn't understand what you were looking for.
Yep. Yep. Perfect. Or there's an element of guesswork there, and it's just potluck. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this again doesn't tell you what to do; it tells you what to look at.
Yeah. Yep. Cool.
Yeah. So basically, I would just kind of go through and find those roughly 50% groups. So let's just kind of maybe ignore these ones because I'm feeling they're maybe a little bit funny. We'll focus on the rest of them. So if I grab, I need this to be bigger so I can see where it's 50%. Maybe I should. This is a very big section. Maybe I need to start lower down. I'm looking where the pattern kind of breaks up. 3, 5. Okay, this is looking a little better. Yeah, okay, so we might say that that's one group, and I just basically put a box around it, just so I remember where it is. So the people in these rows, what we're saying with this box is these are the things that they could do if they had some additional supports. The people who are above that, they probably don't need an enormous amount of support. We certainly give them feedback. In fact, some of these people who got everything correct here, we may have no idea what will stretch them. We may need extra challenge tasks if we want to give them something interesting to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's one group, and we could find other ones as well. This is interesting. The way that I've done it this time is only turning into 2 boxes. I'm pretty sure the final one probably had 3 or 4. So yeah, so this has kind of given us 3 groups essentially. So one group, these are the things that they can do with support. For another, these ones they might need support with. I would broadly say these 2 probably everyone's kind of on top of. And then there's a whole group of students where they can probably do all of these. So that's kind of the information that I would extract from this. And yeah, again, if there are strange sort of patterns, like maybe I might look at this and kind of see, well, there are a bunch of zeros in this one, even though, this is above the I can do it with help. So in principle, everyone here should more or less be able to get it, but this is not like the odd 5%er getting it wrong. So maybe then I might need to look at that one. So yeah, there's elements of guesswork and thinking and trying to make decisions about what are we going to do with this information. So it is subjective, but it's entirely just based on sorting things in those 2 different ways, and then just looking for these sort of roughly 50% of the time people got it groups. And I think I may have. I feel like on my next slide. Oh yeah, so there's another me having done it a slightly different way, and you can kind of see again there I did decide to include the last ones, and I decided that was one group and that was one group and that was one group. So it can be different the different times that you do it. it's not 100%, but it does give you direction. Oh, on the screen I'm listing what I decided from that. There you go. So what I inferred was some of those basically people knew how to scaffold their assessments, and maybe a small number of people I needed to give support with, but most people understood that. Rubrics was something that people needed support with, which we also saw when we did it a little bit. And then, yeah, those ones where I was kind of like, oh, maybe they didn't realize that was something that they needed to do. I've just inferred that they just did not think that was part of the job. So I've come to that inference twice. So possibly that means that that's a meaningful inference. Yeah, so basically that's kind of what I would do with this sort of information. It gives you inferences, and then you decide what to do on the basis of that. Whether you go back to the subject matter expert, or if you're doing it yourself, you might build extra supports in for this group here. You might build supports in these areas. And if you find that there's a big group of people where they just seem to be able to do everything, you might decide that you need extra things to challenge people, ways to stretch them because they may not be interested more in what they're doing. Yeah. So I think that was it for me.